Welcome back, everyone. So, we are starting off with session two. Just want to remind everybody that we are live streaming around the world via YouTube right now, which is very exciting. I am going to invite everyone in terms of the session two speakers to remember that when you greet the audience, please do so in your birth language before you get started. And our next presentation is Resilience Through Sound, the power of music as a catalyst for meaning and renewal. Take it away, Professor Wolf.
Thank you very much, Dr. Linder, and shalom. Shalom from Haifa, Israel. I'm Orit. My name is Orit Wolf, and I am a pianist myself, composer, and poet. I'm a professor of creative arts in Haifa. And before I share with you everything about music as a catalyst for resilience, I'd like to start with some playing, if you don't mind. So I think it's a nice treasure to hear some sounds, and everyone could get inside himself or herself to think about something that you really wish and hope for. Let's start with some Chopin, Noct Waltz by Chopin.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that
Thank you
is
so
my
much.
first, I think that is my first experience of a virtual across the world live pianist presentation. So
Thank you
thank
so
you
much,
so much.
Jackie. This is not
Okay.
trivial to play through Zoom, but it works somehow, and we can only wish to meet sometime soon in person to have a live concert. There's nothing like live music, and this is actually what we're going to speak about it just now, and I'm going to share with you my presentation at the moment. We'll just share it in a second, and we can go into everything together. I'm going to do it in presentation mode. Let's see that you are
Marvelous.
all fantastic. Now, everyone is seeing it, right?
Yes, we are. You're not in slideshow. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Okay,
Perfect.
carry on.
So, so just to start with, this is where I come from, the Technion, which is actually a university for technology and engineering and medicine in Israel, in Haifa, up north. This is our campus, and just that you see where I am, because people are wondering how it looks like, this is Haifa, where we are. We have the Mediterranean and the mountains, the Carmel Mountains together. It's a lovely place, and I wish you one day to come here as well. And my first sentence to begin with, and so I'm passionate about, and my mantra is music is not nice to have, music is a must have. And I'm going to elaborate on this vision that I come from, both as a pianist and a researcher at the Technion. So I'd like to share with you some recent I would say researches and articles about how music is a catalyst and really for resilience of both emotional and cognitive and social. And this is a recent one from 2021 from Frontier in Psychology saying that there are 8 segments of music activity, both as active playing and also active listening. Music and dance, as you can see, group singing, instrument playing, sharing music, and there's several segments that you can see, and what they discovered that in all different segments we get emotional regulation, cognitive improvement, social bonding through music, physical activation and relaxation, and self-esteem empowering. So these are all, I would say, consequences and results of music therapy or music playing or music listening through those 8 segments. Another great research just recently from 2025 in Frontier in Neuroscience showing that if you actually play, if you actually make music with your hands, you are even more recovering and receiving this resilience more than just a passive listening. So if you haven't started learning an instrument, it's never too late, I would say, to start and play something. It's not just great cognitively, it's also a great bonding emotional. Another one, before we start, for my life and my research, is another one that was also in 2025 by Feng in BMC Psychology, saying that after 8-week music therapy, among 256 adults, we have seen a great improvement of well-being and also increase in employability. So people who are going through music therapy are better to find a job, that's what they say. Now, my vision is really seeing classical music, the world I come from, as a resilient practice. I'm always looking to see how I can bring people to classical music in a different, in a new way. And this is something that I go with, not just from being in Boston University in the Royal Academy of Music, where I studied, but also it's in what I do today. And I have to say, I'll share with you some of my research, but also my concert, because I'm sharing both sides as being an active performer and being a researcher on this subject as well. So the first problem before we start is that classical music is dying. There is not much classical music audience these days. I'm not going to get into the reasons and all the causes, but we know that not many people are going to hear classical music. Now, problem number two, that if you're already going to hear a classical music concert, usually you're going for a pure concert. When I say pure concert, that you have no mediation, no one to explain to you the music so much. But also you have other problems, that sometimes you have too much of lectures before concert, but they are so separated from the actual concert. And option number three is usually entertainment concert, which I'm not going to speak about. It's not what I'm looking forward to speak about. So really what's missing here, and that's what I'd like to really be emphasizing today, is a sort of new model, and this is my search, to look from a concert lecture to concert journey. And when I say concert journey, it's really a 360 degrees of experience, not just delivering content, but actually bring my audience into a 360 degrees of experience. While we speak, we give examples, we host different artists, we do interdisciplinary arts within the concert performance. So you can see dancers and you can see poets and you can see painters on stage really participating and engaging in the music experience. So for me, it's a matter of sound, story, and space. And those three elements are so vital in creating something new, something meaningful, that not just bringing classical music into everyone, but also create resilience. And that's what I'm going to show you. So it's a multi-sensory experience of classical music. And my aim is to bring people from content to a full experience, not to teach them anything, not to lecture to them about anything, but to really give them something to feel and be inspired and take with them forward beyond the concert. And I'd like to quote Leonard Bernstein, one of the greatest conductors of the 20th century, and a great pianist and of course a composer who wrote the West Side Stories. He said, people will forget what you said or what you did, but they will never forget how you let them feel. This is so strong, and I think this man that really started the concept of concert lecture is really my mentor, because it's all about an experience in the very end. And you can take a photocopy of this slide, because I really have it as my vision every day that I go out. And again, my new model, and that's what I'd like to show you in the research that we have done, that classical music, I'm not going just to give them information, I'm going to give them meaning. And we have to also take into account that nowadays, this new genre don't have any attention. They have attention span that require immerse, not just giving them lectures or monologues. And again, we are not into explaining the music, but experiencing the music. And I would like to give you an example by the music itself. I can go back to the piano and I can just do the job. I can just play you very simply just the notes, and it will sound like this. This is not going to give me any resilience. I'm not going to be a better person with more morals or even more enchanted evening. But if I take the very same note, the very same music, and I will make it my own, I will put the emotion inside and I will shave it like this. Do you see the difference? Do you hear the difference, basically? Do you hear the difference? I must hear. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm on this side of the screen melting as I
Oh,
hear you.
thank you so much. Because this is really about, it's about making it unique. It's about making it your own. It's about bringing your own narrative into the whole idea. So for me, when I go and I stand in front of my audience, I want to have a narrative framing. I want to have live artistic interpretation. I want to have a dialogue, not just with the audience, but with the artists on stage. And as we said, it's not just regular artists, not just musician, classical musician, but rock and pop musician and dancers and poets and painters. And these are the people that I'm looking for to create the 360 experience that will also bring us to real deep resilience. So as you can see, the model is really about interaction and multisensory and dialogues and narrative and transformation and live interpretation. And now what I'd like to do in our very short time that we have together is really share with you, what it looks like. So this is some photos from my concert series at the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, where I do my concert series for over 17 years now. It started with 70 people, and now we are thousands of subscribers. And the reason, this is the beautiful hall we are playing, but as you can see, this is a concert of waltzes and tangos of Strauss and Chopin, and you can see that it's not just players, it's also lots of dancers who are participating. This is a concert where I do jazz and classical music together. Here, the dancer, dancing to Chopin waltzes. Concerts with orchestra, concerts with improvisation, with singers, opera, and here you see a whole choir. This is just from a few months ago, a whole choir of young artists coming, and really, thank you so much. It's so nice to get your feedbacks. Also with rock and pop and percussionists. And what I am is not to talk about myself, but really to bring you a model that really bring classical music alive in a different way. And this is what we found out. We made the audience answer lots of questions. We have over 400 people participating in this research. And what we found out, we asked them lots of questions. What does it do to them? How do they experience the concert? Journey in itself. And we found several important measurements that I'd like to share with you in these 4 minutes that we have together. So it's emotional elevation and inspiration. It's a feeling that I got something enriching cognitively in terms of knowledge, new knowledge about the music. It's personal self-care, meaning I took time for myself. I invested in myself. I also connected to myself, and I also connected socially with others. I'm anticipating to see the people who are next to me as subscriber that coming again and again, and we share experiences. So this is something very powerful that we found out. And what we also like to do is taking this music journey principle and bringing them into the Technion, into the science community and leadership programs. So here, I'd like to show you what I do at the Technion as an artist in residence. That's how I started before I became a professor there. I put the piano inside the campus, not in nice halls, not in nice rooms, but actually in the ground, on the grass, creating a disruption. And we need disruption because this whole world is a big disruptive world. And what happened that people are starting to play in campus, in the streets. And we have another form of bringing this. Thank you so much, Joel. Music, science, and inspiration, where we bring artists and scientists together. So I think the main idea today is the interdisciplinary relations and concentrations to bring people that are so apart together and find what really is connected, not what's separated between them. And as you can see here, you can see scientists and artists together speaking, and there's always a grand piano on stage because we always play, whether it's piano or violin, and you see the attendance, which is full halls, And actually here you can see the Nobel Prize laureate, Professor Tchekanover, with us as well as a great biologist and scientist. So this is my task, and I have to say that my main idea is that where words fall silent, music teaches us how really to be strong and how to listen. And this is my main idea, because music is not the sounds, music is the time between the sounds. And I think it's those moments that we are quiet, that we listen between the sounds, that make us so much stronger and so much resilient. And Mozart used to say it, music is not the notes, music is not the sounds, music is the time you take between them. So perhaps I will end up with another small piece for you to reflect on those ideas. It's very short, it's just tasting it, but it'll be such a great honor to play for you one short piece. Would you like to? Great.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. That was wonderful to be
Thank
with you.
you.
And I think we are
That
just on
was
time.
beautiful. You are just on time, that which is also amazing. Clearly, you are a professional performer. What a gift. What a gift. I have questions, of course, which I will keep to the Q&A session. I will now invite our next presenter to put his slides up. The topic is resilience in neoliberal discourse vernacular, a discourse of personal responsibility. We even get music in terms of the timer ending. How wonderful. This is a beautiful lead into our next talk. Okay, here we go. Dr. Demeke.
Whoops, sorry, I have to unmute.
Okay.
Can you
Yes,
hear me?
welcome.
Okay.
We can hear you now. Thank
Okay,
you.
good, good. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present. Um, my title is Resilience in Neoliberal Vernacular, the Discourse of Personal Responsibility. Uh, so it's really an attempt to harness the power and optimism that resides in the concept and practice of resilience. Um, but I do so in part by cautioning against the resilience discourse that's been proliferating, and also point out the dangers that may attend the discourse um, when resilience discourse is being co-opted by dominant governing ideologies, specifically neoliberalism. Sorry, bear with me for a second. Am I sharing something else now, or am I still on the screen?
No, you've lost your PowerPoint slides. We're now, I think, looking at notes.
Okie dokie.
Let's go back to your slides.
think. Just bear with me for 1 second.
There you are. Now it needs to go into presenter view or slideshow.
Then I can't see my notes, I guess, right?
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Yes, I see the dilemma. Okay, if this works for you, then go ahead.
Okay, okay. So, as I say, it's to explore the underbelly of resilience discourse. So I begin with two quotations in their book entitled The Resilient Life, The Art of Living Dangerously. Brad Evans and Julian Reed state that resilience has become one of the key terms of our age, the governing ideal of contemporary societies. This statement comes in the context of their discussion about how resilience has expanded across fields of policy, security, social thought, to the point of functioning as a dominant ideological framework. Similarly, David Chandler, in his book Resilience, The Governance of Complexities, states, "Today, resilience has emerged as a pervasive framework across policy fields, shaping how problems are understood and how responses are managed." These statements express what is already becoming a commonplace in academic, governance, as well as in policy sectors. The idea that resilience is now invoked by a multiplicity of stakeholders and is gaining currency in non-formal pedagogic spheres of life is ubiquitous. Indeed, the appeal of resilience as a discourse is understandable. It is, after all, defined as a psychological capacity that refers to the process of effectively negotiating, adapting to, and managing significant sources of stress or trauma, with the capacity for maintaining or regaining mental health despite adversity. Insofar as resilience is conceived as rebounding from setback, it is almost unobjectionable. Who would prefer not to recover from a position of being in a disadvantageous predicament? But it's my contention that the idea is not as innocuous as it appears at first glance. Anytime an idea or a practice attains a wide currency, such as resilience is gaining, it's worth exploring its intersections through a political lens. For politics, as many scholars, ancient and modern, have taught us, is a master science. Rassier, for example, sees politics as the act that reconfigures what can be seen, said, and done. Or we have Charles Taylor, who firmly proclaims a society must recognize and sustain certain moral and cultural frameworks if individuals are to live meaningful lives. The state inevitably endorses some frameworks over others. Thus, it behooves us to interrogate how resilience is to be appropriated by governance discourses. In doing so, I take this presentation with a particularly dominant statecraft we understand as neoliberalism. By neoliberalism, I understand the language and practice of political governance that favors market logic and market values to govern social and political institutions that lead to increased privatization, deregulation, as a reaction to economic uncertainties that engulfed the Western world in the 1970s. Leaders like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were neoliberalism's great proponents and promoters. Neoliberalism has had tangible impact in Canada as well. Historically, it made possible the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA in 1994, promoted deregulated cross-border trade and investment, and deregulated financial markets. Policies reduced government oversight of banking, telecommunications, and energy sectors to stimulate competition in privatized state enterprises. Crown corporations such as Air Canada and Petro-Canada saw privatization and commercialization. It led to the welfare state retrenchment through cuts to social programs, including unemployment insurance, social assistance, and public housing. Public projects saw a spike in public-private partnerships, and some provinces saw fees and co-payments to health, education, and public services. But neoliberalism is more than an economic program. It is also a cultural and ideological one that is prominent but also subtle, whose influences is becoming so pervasive as to be clearly noticed by the public. It marks a decisive shift towards competition between citizens and away from collective responsibilities to personal resilience. It privileges productivity and efficiency over collective well-being. This is the context that gives me a point of entry into bringing neoliberalism, this multifaceted ideological construct, and resilience together. Unsurprisingly, neoliberalism has in fact been deeply engaged in resilience, and in fact it's been remaking it in its image, as I will momentarily show. This, in fact, is the main point of my presentation. That is the claim that first, neoliberalism is in fact deeply engaged, ideologically drawn to resilience as a social discourse, and second, that neoliberalism co-opts resilience discourse in a subversive manner, turning it into an instrument of its own ends. And my friendly challenge to attendees of the session is to argue for the indispensability of bringing a critical lens to the topic of resilience and to make a case for why not doing so undermines efforts to leverage resilience for salutary social ends. Since neoliberal reforms of the 1990s that reshaped social welfare, labor markets, and public administration, resilience has been a key feature of governance in Canada. Here, I want to delineate three of its defining facets. First is the idea that the state should retreat from its role as supporting those that are exposed to vulnerabilities. As David Chandler puts it, resilience thinking enables the withdrawal of the state by reimagining communities as self-organizing systems capable of absorbing shocks and without external support. Second, neoliberalism redefines the good citizen as one that is adaptable and able to self-govern, including in times of crisis. The neoliberal turn has promoted a thinner conception of citizenship, one that emphasizes personal responsibility over shared obligation. And third, a good citizen whom the state has abandoned to her own devices is redefined as one that is resilient. A case that illustrates neoliberalism's ideological import is Canada's response to COVID-19 pandemic. Although the federal government CERB provisions is a state action directed at supporting those who face the brunt of the pandemic, the most prominent social messages during the pandemic that inundated the public sphere were about what individuals can and should do to arrest the pandemic. The often repeated messages were wear a mask, wash your hands, keep social distance. This shifted the locus of potential remedies from government instruments to individual citizens. As Shields put it, under the neoliberal order, precarity is believed to drive resilience. The sector has been expected to continuously do more with less. Those who occupy the bottom ranks of the economic ladder, essential workers as they were called, and could not afford to stay home bore the sacrificial brunt of the pandemic. The cruel irony is that those whose economic well being would have allowed them to exercise some resilience managed to keep safe by staying home.
3 minutes.
The case I'm trying to make is not that resilience is not a legitimate source of hope, empowerment, or viable means of responding to setbacks or crises, but that its potential is woefully diminished by a neoliberal discourse that distorts it. In so doing, neoliberalism has decisively marched to changing how we relate to one another and how we understand engage in the social world for the worse. As Michael Sandel explains, we live at a time when everything can be bought and sold. As the Cold War ended, markets and market thinking enjoyed unprivileged prestige, and understandably so. No other mechanism for organizing the production and distribution of goods had proven as successful as generating affluence and prosperity. Economics was becoming an imperial domain. Today, the logic of buying and selling no longer applies to material goods alone, but increasingly governs the whole of life. It's time to ask whether we want to live this way or not. So essentially, what I am trying to argue here is that the potential that resides in resilience discourse is being co-opted, and not paying attention to neoliberalism's interaction with the discourse of resilience will undermine efforts that try to harness all the resources that reside with resilience discourse, and that adopting a critical lens, a political orientation to understanding resilience is indispensable to harnessing its potential.
Thank you so much, Dr. Demeke. We are going to go to our next presentation. I'm already scribbling down notes. I have questions for you in the Q&A. Our next presentation is Centering Uncharted Narratives, Amplifying the Voices of Diverse Racialized Women in Academic Leadership. And this is brought to us by Dr. Sandra Dixon. She was unable to be with us live in this slot, and so she sent us a pre-recorded presentation, which we're currently loading. Raven, I'm not able to hear the, oh, we are not able to hear the presentation. The audio is not coming through. Let's begin again and see if we can get some sound. No, is anyone else hearing sound? I'm not getting any sound on my end.
No, not hearing anything.
Okay.
No sound.
Okay, so we're having some technical issues. I'm wondering, Dr. Lomia, while we try and figure out what's going on with Dr. Dixon's presentation, oh, is someone else going to try and share?
Hello, everyone. Welcome
There we
to
go.
my presentation today. My presentation is entitled Centering Uncharted Narratives, Amplifying the Voices of Diverse Racialized Women in Academic Leadership. My name is Dr. Sandra Dixon. I am an associate professor at the University of Lethbridge and also associate faculty at City University, Calgary campus. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and also Google Scholar. I would like to start off with the land acknowledgement. City University acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations of Canada, as well as other peoples whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. So just take a few seconds to reflect on where you're located and acknowledge that we're settlers on Indigenous land. Thank you, and I'll continue. I would like to acknowledge that this project was funded by Western Canadian Research Fund through City University of Seattle, the Calgary campus. I'd also like to acknowledge my research assistant, Millie Bada, and Maria Leonard for their assistance with this project. I have 3 objectives for today's presentation. First is to explore the experiences of diverse racialized women in academic leadership. 2, to discuss the importance of culturally responsive leadership. And 3, to provide practical strategies for promoting equity and inclusion. Informing this study, I would like to highlight some key definitions. Diverse racialized women, these are viewed as effectively conveys the focus on intersectionality and the experiences of women from diverse racial backgrounds. Diverse academic women is seen as individuals working within higher education institutions where their intersected social cultural identities such as race and gender are impacting their personal experiences, values, and worldviews. Academic leadership, in this context, it is viewed as a process of influence expressed through governance and decision-making within higher education institutions. In terms of the literature that informs this project, it is important to note that systemic disparities faced by diverse racialized women in academic leadership oftentimes leads to underrepresentation in leadership positions, lack of opportunities for career advancement, and microaggressions and bias. Additionally, we see that based on the research, female faculty earn 32% less than male faculty from the dominant group. We also see that diverse academic women, otherwise known as DA in this context, are underrepresented in research, teaching, and services. And we see that in 2015, visible minorities made up 4.8% of leadership positions in Montreal. Quite a staggering number. And it's very clear that leadership norms perpetuate gaps and inequities by preventing women and people of color from advancing to leadership roles in institutional settings. In one quote I wanted to share with you from the literature stated, and I quote, "I am the first African American executive in the entire school system. And it just hurts me that I don't understand how we can't see that is an issue because it's not representative of our demographics." So quite staggering, the low percentage of racialized academic women in leadership positions, especially within institutions. Now let's look at the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion in academic institutions. So it's really important to think about non-performative leadership. And in academia, the form of leadership means leading authentically, focusing on substance over show. That's really important. So really shifting away from performative to non-performative leadership is really important. Sustainability is also important, and this is where we're able to provide diverse academic women with greater sustainability in higher education. Also, the need to shift from being anti-racist to non-racist is important. So anti-racist actively fights against racism, not just acting racist. So shifting from being a non-racist to being anti-racist is very critical when we look at higher education. Also, shifting actions is critical when we think of EDI, and shifting from a non-racist to anti-racist really involves taking action and being clear about language and definitions, being clear about how you're able to show up in those spaces. Using privilege for change is critical. And here we're really challenging you to move beyond professing solidarity to actively using privilege to advocate and experiment with new actions. So we do have privilege in our own right. And so really ensuring that we're using our privilege to make sure we're advocating and we're standing alongside our colleagues who are also going through challenges systemically in the institutions. I would like to share with you the theoretical framework that informs this work. So it's called the ARC model, meaning A for awareness, R for rational, and C for choice. This model was developed by Dr. Snaggs Wilson. It provides a culturally responsive framework to foster equity and inclusion. Some key components of the model. So when you think of awareness, it's really recognizing biases and privileges. Rational is understanding the impact of biases and privileges. And choice is making intentional decisions to promote equity and inclusion. So how do we apply the ARC model in practice? So the benefits of the model is that it does promote self-reflection and critical consciousness. It also fosters inclusive leadership practices. In how we apply it in practice, we need to really consider self-reflection and awareness exercises. So what are some reflectivity and reflexivity exercises that we can actually do to ensure that we are promoting EDI in academic spaces? It's important for us to also develop inclusive policies and practices in institutions and create opportunities for marginalized voices to be heard and also to be respected. Some examples of inclusive leadership practices might be mentorship programs for diverse racialized women, inclusive hiring practices, and culturally responsive performance evaluations. So ensuring that these evaluation practices are inclusive and the individuals who are being evaluated should be part of the development and design process. It's important for us to think about ways for us to disrupt dominant white spaces. And here I intentionally use a lowercase white W to decenter whiteness and also to acknowledge the voices of non-dominant group in dominant spaces. So thinking about decolonization and how we're able to shift the balance. So thinking about disruption, it's really important to embrace discomfort as a catalyst for progress. And when we think about embracing discomfort, what we're essentially doing is challenging dominant narratives and power structures, and we are creating space for marginalized voices to be heard. We also need to think about strategies for disrupting dominant white spaces. And we can do that by engaging in difficult conversations, creating brave spaces for dialogue and growth, and amplifying marginalized groups and voices. And so using brave spaces over safe spaces is really important, because here we're really leaning into our discomfort instead of leaning out of discomfort, which oftentimes tends to happen when we're in safe spaces. Culturally responsive leadership is essential. And there are principles of culturally responsive leadership that we need to consider. And these would include cultural humility and awareness, empathy and understanding, and adaptability and flexibility. And thinking about how leaders can apply the ARC model to create meaningful change, one is really developing awareness of our biases and privileges, creating inclusive policies and practices, and also fostering a culture of equity and inclusion. It's also important when we think about working within certain dominant spaces, it's important to also create brave spaces in those contexts as well. And the importance of creating brave spaces for dialogue and growth, it really allows fostering a culture of trust and respect, encouraging open and honest conversation and communication. Some strategies that we can use to create brave spaces would include embracing discomfort as an opportunity for growth and deeper inclusion. And here we're moving from leaning in, which is avoiding difficult conversations, leaning out, which is avoiding difficult conversations, to leaning in, which is more engaging with different and diverse perspectives. And by so doing, we're essentially fostering a more inclusive academic environment. Another strategy to consider when we're thinking about creating brave spaces is really establishing clear guidelines and expectations around what we're expecting from racialized academic women, and also encouraging active listening and empathy, and ensuring that we're standing alongside those individuals who are being impacted. Intersectionality in leadership is also an important part of the discourse in academic spaces. So it's important to think about intersectionality in leadership, and by so doing, we're recognizing the multiple identities and experiences of individuals. Dominant leadership styles often favor masculinity and aggressiveness, ignoring social identities and inequities, and creating inclusive policies and practices that address intersectional issues. How can leaders apply an intersectional lens? They can do that by developing awareness of intersectional issues, establishing inclusive policies and practices, and also cultivating a culture of equity and inclusion to achieve institutional social justice. So I'm going to leave you with some calls to action to consider as we think about how to dismantle and to disrupt academic spaces. We need to ensure that we lead with inclusivity and recognize that we do have a diverse range of experiences, expertise amongst individuals who are racialized. And so we need to create space for those voices and experiences to be a part of the discourse. We need to acknowledge our own biases and privilege, and how this can help or hinder other individuals to move forward in those dominant spaces. It's important for us to amplify racialized women's voices, to create space for their experiences to be heard, and to note that they do have value and they do have the capacity to make a difference. Also, acknowledging the ARC model is important. So really having a framework to inform how we show up in academic spaces is really important. And lastly is really learning to sustain change. And we can do that collectively, collaboratively, and we can together make an impact in academic spaces, not only for ourselves, but for all of other individuals. Thank you.
Okay. So Dr. Dixon's not able to be with us here today, so she will not be participating in the Q&A, but her contact information has been included in the abstracts, and so you're welcome to email her directly and follow up with any queries that you have. Our next presentation is entitled Resilience and Power Shifts in a Fragmented World Between East and West. So Dr. Lomia, if you could go ahead and load your slides. While we get our tech organized, I will read to you a little bit from the abstract for this talk. In the 21st century, the international community faces a renewed ideological confrontation that echoes the tensions of the past century. Political polarization within the United States continues to intensify, particularly ahead of the upcoming presidential elections, as domestic divisions intersect with global instability. Dr. Lomia, are you able to load your slides or do you require our assistance? It looks like Dr. Lomia has lost connection to the conference. I'm assuming that she's probably trying to log in. So what we're going to do while we try and get her back on the line is move to Dr. Guy, which is the final, the semi-final presentation for this block. And Dr. Guy's topic is Back to the Future, the case for pen and paper in post-secondary writing classrooms in the age of generative AI.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Linder. I have my notes right here. AI writing support has been embedded in every popular writing tool, from Word to Google Docs to Grammarly and so far beyond. A starry pencil appears when you type a WhatsApp message. Have you noticed that? Inviting you to pull from the heavens and sprinkle cosmic dust on your phrases. AI summarizing functions interrupt your PDF perusal. Design bots exhort you to enliven your presentations as you struggle to paste in functional bullets. And then there's ChatGPT itself, an app whose usage numbers inflate and deflate along with the typical North American school calendar. The perfect cheating machine that is threatening to end decades of typical higher ed assessment strategies. In a sensational and discouraging article published this spring, James D. Walsh wrote, in January 2023, just 2 months after OpenAI launched ChatGPT, a survey of 1,000 college students found nearly 90% of them had used the chatbot to help with homework assignments. In its first year of existence, ChatGPT's total monthly visits steadily increased month over month until June, when schools let out for the summer, end quote. That was over 2 years ago, and we all know, we've probably all experienced what's happened since then, right? In addition to this revolution in push-button plagiarism, there are the catastrophic social, environmental, political, economic, and spiritual risks of concentrating so much control over the flow of information and communication in the hands of a tiny number of for-profit entities. According to Kate Crawford, in her 2021 book, Atlas of AI, 2021, this is even longer ago, quote, the massive ecosystem of AI relies on many kinds of extraction, from harvesting the data made from our daily activities and expressions, to depleting natural resources, and to exploiting labor around the globe, so that this vast planetary network can be built and maintained, end quote. It can seem at times our society is rushing to offload as much intellectual effort onto these systems as fast as we possibly can, creating even greater dependence on the technology companies that have caused so much harm and generated so much profit for so few in the smartphone and social media era. An early study of the impact of AI use on critical thinking capacity by Michael Gerlich says, quote, the long-term reliance on AI for cognitive offloading could also erode essential cognitive skills, such as memory retention, analytical thinking, and problem solving. As individuals increasingly rely on AI tools, their internal cognitive abilities may atrophy, leading to diminished long-term memory and cognitive health, end quote. And yet, we're left to wonder, why are our students accepting this technology as the next evolution of word processing, a beefy grammar check, the antidote to dull reading or time-consuming wading through reams of scholarly research or even simple websites? Googling is passé. I moved last week, and as the mover finished lifting the final thing and was tallying how many hours it took, he took out his phone and used ChatGPT to measure the distance between 9 a.m. and 1:15 p.m. Use ChatGPT to do that. So there you go. That's it. That's the world that we're living in right now. The pressure to accept the inevitability of AI cognitive offloading is profound, right? And it's happened. There are TV ads. There are the aforementioned sudden appearances of AI functions in daily knowledge work tools. There are the obvious labor-saving possibilities, of course. And yet, despite the widespread instructor, administrator, and student awareness of pervasive academic integrity violations in higher education, assessments are only changing now. There has been a boom in testimonials in academic trade journals like The Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed about the need to return to first principles. And it seems as if the 2025-26 academic year is the beginning of a widespread reckoning, which is great. So, the strategies I'm recommending work. Is the solution as simple as forcing students to use paper and pen? Not in every case, of course. But for all disciplines that typically rely on writing as the best way to measure deep engagement with key concepts, and for all graduate level writing contexts across disciplines, a reimagining of our assessment processes and pedagogy is essential. Here is what is currently working for me. It's kind of a practical narrative account of my own pedagogical strategies around this topic. So my switch to pen and paper assessment came just this year, partly because I had a sabbatical year in 2023, working in a small academic upgrading school in Spain. And in that classroom, in that school, it was so small that classroom activities hadn't been digitized yet. So it was good old-fashioned whispering was how the students were breaking the rules, craning the neck to look at their classmates' paper. Right? Quaint, touching to remember. As a sessional academic writing instructor, in the recent past when I came back, working with 100% or majority EAL learners, I vowed to bust ChatGPT by following the lead of writing instruction experts like Jason Warner and others and switching wherever possible to in-class handwritten assignments. That's what I've been doing now for close to 8 months. And the results are conclusive. Students find this unpleasant. They do not care for it at first, as you can predict. However, many grudgingly admitted that they were glad to get the opportunity to actually practice this skill. And I observed significant improvement along the pre-chatbot patterns that I'd grown accustomed to over a decade and a half of teaching introductory academic writing skills classes. When you teach students how to properly scaffold an essay, you can trace the development of an idea from proposal through final draft. And by devoting class time to paper-driven reading and writing exercises, you can compare gaps in polish from stage to stage. According to a 2025 meta-analysis of neuroscience research on the benefits of writing by hand, titled, quote, "The Neuroscience Behind Writing, Handwriting versus Typing, Who Wins the Battle?" Great inflammatory title, love that. Giuseppe Morano and the other writers say, quote, "Research suggests handwriting may offer specific advantages over typing, especially when it comes to memory retention and comprehension." I'll sort of skip through this quotation. Handwriting slows down the note-taking process, prompting the subject to actively paraphrase and process the material rather than merely transcribe it. In addition, positive mood during learning is significantly higher during handwriting than during typing. So the advantage of handwriting over typing might also be caused by a more positive mood during learning. Okay, so great news. But I'll just take a step back and talk a bit more about the nuts and bolts of my practice right now, and discuss, scaffolding a research paper. Probably most of you understand what that means, but if you're not in the trenches of academic writing instruction, you may not be familiar with that term. And introductory composition classes best practices. It typically involves a multi-stage, multi-submission structure, moving, typically a first year undergraduate student through the phases of academic research paper writing, right? So you begin with a proposal, defining a project of a scope, matching the word count and objective of the assignment. Students might then complete an annotated bibliography, perhaps, an outline, perhaps, and generally a first draft and a final draft, sometimes with peer review, exercise or assignment embedded between stages. And variations on that type of assignment are characteristic of academic writing introductory courses, one of which I taught the summer past to international stream only, EAL only, bridging students at a satellite campus of the University of Lethbridge, where Dr. Dixon teaches. That version of the introductory academic writing class involved handwritten phases for the annotated bibliography, where the students had to hand annotate a scholarly article during a class session. And they had to handwrite several paragraphs of their first draft during a class drafting session. And they had to peer edit a draft of one of their classmates as well. So in addition to the handwritten scaffolded essay work, in-class assignments included a handwritten summary of an academic article, a handwritten response paper to course readings, and grammar quizzes. I frequently confiscated phones, which I can strongly recommend. Great feeling, right? When students agree, right? It's a nice way to adjust the atmosphere in your classroom. And right now in my role as Academic Writing Center Director at CityU Calgary, CityU Canada's Calgary campus, I've collected handwritten reading responses from every student to provide a record and point of comparison with any digital submissions in the case of any academic integrity violation in any of their coursework or in their capstone project writing as well. So I'm a bit evangelical about the paper and pen, about doing things with your hands. Right? Several caveats are important. Additional language learners are likely better able to understand the importance of failure, correction, and practice in the learning process, right? It's built into learning another language. Teaching dedicated writing classes feature outcomes, objectives, and assessments that lend themselves well to narrowly targeting fundamental writing skills, including research and argumentation. But these strategies may not be transferable quite so easily across disciplines and levels of instruction, where if you're not really measuring someone's ability to write, if you're measuring somebody's ability to reason or to absorb key concepts across disciplines, devoting this amount of class time, I understand, is very rare and perhaps somewhat luxurious. In the case of current CityU Canada International Stream grad students in educational leadership, the existing program design has proven extremely flexible in accommodating this practice, though. The build up to completing the program culminating capstone report, 40 to 50 page lit review project on a topic devised, researched, and executed by the students, has featured many hours of in-class drafting, peer review, and editing activities, many of which involve printed matter or handwritten process documents. Have been able to build it in at the graduate level. Unlike in a typical grad level thesis semester, the students spend close to 60 hours across 2 semesters working in person in sections of 6 to 8 students. And the amount of individual attention each student can expect from their supervisor, in this case me, it's pretty incredible, right? And I bet few people on this call spent 60 hours with their master's supervisor, or maybe even with their PhD supervisor over years, right? So it's a huge benefit. The pace of the program and the mandatory face-to-face hours are a blessing for this strategy. The problem of modeling a writing process that builds toward proper grad level scholarship intended for publication is thorny outside of this highly specialized and extremely student-centered approach. The typical supervision strategy for a grad student is to establish internal deadlines with regular meetings or draft reviews to ensure steady progress and academic rigor. It's not likely, nor perhaps desirable, to move to supervised drafting sessions for non-EL learners, right? So that is an open question, and I'm definitely interested to hear ideas about that, or hear what works for other people. A recently published essay in the online magazine The Point by a current American undergrad student outlines the superficiality, she calls it, of in-person handwritten responses, as a counterpoint. You are, of course, always working with first drafts, or not always, but often, right? The deep thinking and slow improvement that happens in larger projects is lost and cannot be replaced. So I won't read that quotation, but I think that's a really useful and provocative counterpoint from an actual student. Now, it's a student at an elite American institution, Ivy League institution, who wants to be a writer. So I think that it is a really useful point of view. So in conclusion, if we're going to build resilient students and resilient institutions of higher education and resilient societies in the age of climate change and the infinite scroll, we're going to need words, lots of them. Those words need to be written down. They need to be printed. They need to last. There's little pleasure in feeling like yet another Cassandra, fruitlessly warning students, colleagues, and decision makers that we are revolutionizing communication at our own expense. I turn my back to the future and pick up my pen, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guy. You are right on time. Unfortunately, Dr. Lomia, who did come to us from Tbilisi, Georgia, she was with us an hour ago. She has lost connectivity and is not able to get back in. She is going to keep trying, and if there is a way to fit her into another session, we will attempt to do that. In the meantime, we're going to move forward with our Q&A, so I'm going to invite back Dr. Sky, Dr. Demike, and Professor Wolf to turn on your videos and your microphone. Because I'm moderating this session, I get to ask my questions first, and then other people can queue up their questions. So, Professor Wolf, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I so enjoyed it. I have a question. I have a question about the soul of a people. So, in my view, I was born in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Very, very musical culture. We gave the world Bob Marley. I mean, how can we not say we are musical culture? So even in my lived experience, I know music to be representative of the soul of a people. So what does it mean when you say classical music is dying? That's one component. The other component, of course, is not everybody can afford a baby grand piano. So there's an element of privilege in terms of accessing certain types of music. So as if music is in fact the soul of a culture or represents the soul of a culture, and it is on the one hand dying or on the other hand limited to a few privileged people, what does that mean in terms of music as a mechanism for connecting?
Fantastic question, Jackie. We have to understand that we're all making music, not just with instrument. We are making music with our voice while we're speaking.
Mm,
When we are angry, when we are tempting, when we are caressing, when we are in love, we are speaking in certain voice and a certain music with our voice. So music is with us, no matter if we have an instrument or we don't.
okay.
Now, yeah, that's number one. So it's part of the culture. It's
So
part
it's
of our
more
identity.
democratic. It's more democratic than thinking about it only in terms of instruments. Okay, I accept
Right.
that point. Okay.
Right. So this is number one. Regarding instrument, you're right that a piano costs, it's not a fortune. You can get an upright piano for about $500. But you don't have to go for piano. You can go for another instrument. And nowadays, if somebody is very keen to play piano and he does not have the means, there are way to receive it and get a digital one. So it's really not a matter of money, it's a matter of tradition. And I think we lack the tradition nowadays in the last 70, 80 years of really bringing the new generation into even listening to classical music. It sounds as
Mm,
if this is music for 200 years ago. It's belongs
hmm
for the past. So if I see my own kids, they do not have classical music education at all in preliminary schools, in elementary school, in high school. So they're not open-minded anymore to this
hmm
beautiful and intellectual and also very emotional music, which I think is amazing once you have the tools to connect to it.
hmm hmm Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Demeke, if you would. So, in terms of this idea of interrogating the concept of resilience, I really like that idea of wanting to drill down to the granular level of the word and think about how such a powerful word is used pro-socially or anti-socially. And I think part of the case you're making is it can be used for either thing, and so be very, very careful how you use it. In your view, what guardrails must be in place to ensure that such a powerful concept is used pro-socially or constructively and not as a way to marginalize people? Because under the guise of resilience, you can hide a lot of stuff, right? Like the people in power dropping the ball or the system is poorly designed. Who cares? Just be resilient, individual human, and overcome it. So, but we need the word. It's a meaningful word. It's a powerful word. And in the English language, I'm not sure there is a comparable word. I'd be very interested to hear if other people have a different thought on that. So what guardrails can we put in place to make sure that we are consistently using that word or that concept in a positive, constructive, and pro-social way?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do, and what I was implicitly trying to push in this presentation, is to develop a critical awareness, or what the Brazilian pedagogue Paulo Freire called conscientization. That we have to be conscious of the ways in which the state is not a neutral agent, that there's always political implication and political project behind all states, that states are not neutral. And the way, specifically in neoliberalism, resilience is used is very much subversive, a very much a counterpoint to resilience's redemptive project. The idea is that in neoliberalism or even liberalism, the idea is not to set people free, um, but set people free in a way that perfects oppression by allowing people to govern themselves. So in the lead up to the this Nexus conference, I engaged with several conversations with friends and colleagues and scholars and non-scholars, and almost everything I heard about resilience is that it's a positive thing, that it inspires hope. It's almost like a panacea for a lot of the ills that we all face. Crisis, pandemic, environmental crisis, and mental health crisis, and it's seen as a panacea to address those issues. And I'm saying here that I acknowledge that, but there's the underbelly of resilience language and practice that is actually subversive, and the way in which neoliberalism extends its influence and permeates our social life makes us unable to see the political project that lies behind. So it's just a cautionary presentation, and it's one where I'm trying to push for critical lens in how we understand resilience.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It's very interesting because as a clinician, I think about the underbelly of a lot of things. Obviously, that goes with being a trauma specialist. I don't ever think about the underbelly of resilience. And I certainly would be one of the people who would be consistently thinking about resilience in a positive way and then missing all of the things that you're trying to draw our attention to. So thank you for that. Dr. Guy, my question for you is actually about uh, I am a horse owner. I have 6 cats and a 1,000-pound horse, who I ran out to visit yesterday and take him for a walk because we're very busy with this conference for the next 3 days, so I will not get to see him. So the horse is out of the barn, I can tell you, in terms of ChatGPT. Like that is, we are in it. Like there is no putting that genie back in the bottle. And yet I do know that there's a significant difference for me. It's actually more emotional as opposed to intellectual. If I journal, I like a thick, inky pen, and I like very textured paper. Love it. Like I love the sensory feedback of it. And if I'm typing, I need to sort of like slam on my keyboard so I can feel the feedback. But I use ChatGPT all the time, and I find it incredibly helpful. So tell us a little bit about how, since the genie is not going back in the bottle, what are the ethical, constructive ways to approach this incredibly powerful technology that will facilitate growth in the learner as opposed to intellectual atrophy?
Yeah, I mean that is the question. That is the question of the 2020s, and I think I've fairly successfully gotten toothpaste back into a tube before. I have toddlers, so I think that and you, I'm sure, yes, have led your horse back to the barn many times. And to Dr. Demike's point about the flip side of resilience, why is it our job, as professors, as writing instructors, why is it our job to figure out how to resist the insistence that this is a groundbreaking, workflow changing tool, But yeah, I think that one of the really key points of distinction for me is the student, and especially a student at particular phases of their education, where there is essentially no ethical way for a student to use ChatGPT for certain tasks, I think. Now, daily life tasks, and especially, administrative tasks are absolutely
Incredibly helpful.
it's
They are
very, very
incredibly helpful.
useful. Exactly.
Yes,
It's
it is.
very, very useful. And yeah, in my own family, of course, I debate this with people who work in other fields who are like, oh, it's just great, I can make my slides in 5 minutes instead of in an hour, and I think that's fine. It does presuppose that you learned how to make the slides in the first place, that you learned how to write in the first place a long time ago, with none of these additional tools. So fine, once you know how to do it, use it as much as you want, take advantage of the efficiencies for sure. But I do think that the critical points in the development of a student, of a scholar, of a thinker, of a person, you can't skip learning how to do it yourself, because then you will never have done it yourself, and Sam Altman will have done it for you.
And this really links to Dr. Wolf's point about uh, people are not getting immersed early enough in the developmental cycle. And so they have gaps later on down the line. And then what they're doing is they're using ChatGPT to fill those gaps. Maybe they're using MP3, they're listening to music as opposed to playing music. Because the gaps are there, and the argument that you're making is, use the technology. It's powerful, it's amazing, but don't allow the gap to remain. Like, make sure that gap is dealt with. Wonderful. Okay, so we have some questions coming in. Let's start with Dr. Carew and then go to Dr. Domingo.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. I have questions for all three. I'll start off with Dr. Wolf. Yes, very fascinating presentation indeed. My question is, did you see any role of music in building resilience during the war in Israel?
Sorry, say it again, please. Could you repeat the question?
Did you see any role of music in building resilience during the war? The war
during the war, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We are just in a post-war situation at the moment in Israel, as you all know. I think music is a core component in really, I would say, rehabilitation. That's the word, rehabilitation. And you can see it also in poetry and also in music composition, that we have a flowering time of lots of poetry and music composed by Israeli, not just pianists, but singers, who are releasing so many singles to the radio right now about the inner feelings and the strength that they need, and the hope and the light, behind the tunnel, double meaning, as you say. So yes, I think we have a whole new generation who generates new music, and music is really, I think, among all arts, and I know I'm not objective because I'm a pianist myself, but I think among all arts forms, I think it's really the highest to express multi-sensory emotions, and really let us feel. Music is not just a nice, relaxing mode. I think the ability to express anger and disappointment and sadness, not just beauty and surreal and relaxation, but also the bitter emotions that we all have. But music is allowing you to play it, to show it, to express it. And that's a gift, because when you play an angry music by Beethoven, that's allowed. You're not being allowed to be angry with other people, but you're allowed to play angry music.
Right.
So I think this is the power of music among all arts.
Thank you so much. And for Dr. Demeke, I saw your analysis based on the underbelly in what I could call capitalist society. Neoliberalism is linked to capitalism. What would it look like in a socialist society?
Well, in a socialist society, I'm relating that to social democracy. There is an assumption of a collective that exists. What's troubling about neoliberalism is its very social ontology denies the existence of society. We're often reminded of Margaret Thatcher's famous saying, "There is no society, only individuals and their families," right? So there's the denial, the very social ontology on which liberalism rests, is that there is no collective. We're just individuals and families, and there's nothing beyond that. So I think it will look decisively different in a socialist context, because there is the admission of the reality that there is a collective. And the role of the state, relatedly, will be very different, will be more interventionist, will be one that sees its role as maintaining a collective and protecting especially those who are vulnerable to the insecurities of the economic system. Would be completely different.
Okay. In other words, you don't see any underbellies coming through there as well.
Not in that context. Maybe in terms of the context of limiting freedom.
Right.
There's always this spectrum of freedom on one side and equality on the other side. The two cardinal values of a liberal democratic system, or any system that claims to be socially just, will have to find a place on this spectrum of navigating, charting the sensible middle ground between freedom and equality. So in a socialist society, it may err on the side of equality to the detriment of freedom. Maybe that is the underbelly.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. And the last one is to Dr. Guy there on AI. I use ChatGPT quite a lot myself, but I have to direct ChatGPT to make sure that I get the correct answer. So my question is, will it ever replace the human being? Did he hear me?
I mean, maybe, yeah. We're not doing that great a job all the time, really, as custodians of Earth. So perhaps an AGI could do better. No, I think we really need to separate the sort of sales marketing side of all connected technology in the 21st century, but specifically around this. And the news this week is full of stories about the AI investment bubble preparing to pop. And I do think it was maybe 18 months ago, we were talking about virtual reality and augmented reality instead of AI. So I do think we always need to be a little wary of how successfully these companies are marketing the tools. Now, people are using the tools, right? And that is reality. And I think that there are all kinds of fundamental beneficial use cases, and there's the possibility for equity. I always, my dream is that the tools will be used to lower language barriers. What if everybody could instantly translate everything all the time? What kind of human potential could be unlocked if there was instant? That is the most sci-fi style utopian dream, but it is, to me, one of the possible benefits. But at the moment, I think the rush to acceptance and the removal of the choice. When you Google something, you're not directed to a website anymore. You get the little AI summary. And soon there won't be websites if Google eats the web traffic of these businesses that depend on advertising dollars, which depend on organic website visits. Those websites won't exist anymore. And then the information, which was decentralized and the product of actual human endeavor and true, authentic human communication practices, it will all be funneled through a very small number of companies who will need to make money somehow to repay this, and they don't know how to do it yet, and we'll be paying. That's what I think.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Dr. Domingo, Dr. Macuena, Dr. Nubla King, Dr. Schmidt. That is the order. Take it away, Dr. Domingo.
Thank you, and I'll defer to the others because I did have questions for each presenter, but I will just, in the interest of time to allow for others to ask questions, I'll just ask one. But first, let me just say I really enjoyed the theme of this session because it really when we talked about resilience as a catalyst. We've talked from Chopin to ChatGPT and spurned the gamut of time and history here, of which it reminded me of a writer, because we are talking sort of in the subtext of an earlier question, changing dominant systems of power and change. And Audre Lorde, who was a writer, said that we cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And so as such, one of the things I keep thinking about is resilience as either complicit in still recognizing the systems and just being resilient against, or actually resilience as an empowerment tool to actually change these narratives. So, having said that, my question is of Professor Wolf. Thank you for your wonderful playing. I could listen to this all day, having been studied a little bit of classical music when I was younger. My question is specific to the form of music. I have a colleague who recently just told me this morning that he got published on using music as a vehicle of teaching history. And he used American music to trace historical movements in the United States. So in terms of the classical music genre, which I love as well, have you found certain forms or modalities or modes of music tend to have more of an effect than, say, others? Perhaps classical versus jazz, or reggae from Jamaica versus something from the African diaspora, let's say.
That's a great question, Dr. Domingo. I love it all. I have to say, it's like asking which kid would you love more. It's really, you love it all, and each period has its own versatility and beauty in itself. But I think if I am to take part of the classical music into other fields, which is very interesting to see how you can project your insights from music making, from music understanding, from music forms into leadership, into science, into also resilience in terms of order, I would definitely take the Baroque era and the classical period in classical music era, which means the mid half of the 17th, 18th century. These centuries, we were talking about, as you know, 300 years ago, 200 years ago, we're all about symmetry. We're all about beauty of architecture. And when you train people to listen to Mozart's sonata, for example, sonata is a beautiful form of architecture, of symmetry, which is ABA form, and first movement, second movement, third movement, everything is like a beautiful arc. And you really train people to find the motives and recognize and identify them and see how they develop. It's a sheer beauty in itself. And if you really dig in and drill down into the forms of those classical music eras, then you can take them to other fields. And also the way we practice as performers, not just a composer, is also a new world of insights, of discipline, of joy, but of uncertainty. And I think part of being resilient is understanding, and this is really deep, to understand that you can't control anything while you're going on stage. You're taking a risk, even if you're so well prepared. This is the message. You can practice 8 hours a day and you can still fail on stage because you had a blackout, because your audience interrupted in some way, because the piano was not so in tune or so well and you're not used to it, because the weather was horrifying and you're too hot or too cold and your finger do not move. So there's so many components that really bring you into an uncertain situation, and you have to understand that no matter how you prepared, nothing is certain. But then come the resilience. Then come the idea that you gain confidence and strength from the meaning and not just the actual how much I put into it and what the results were.
No, thank you. That was wonderful. And I will write these notes on my analog pen as I take that. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mokoena.
Thank you very much, colleagues. My question goes to Dr. Wolf. Thank you for your performance, Dr. Wolf. My question would be, I would want to build on what Dr. Domingo was saying. In the global south here, we talking about decolonization. So I wanted to know, are there any instances and any examples maybe where you are sort of trying to decolonize the classical music education?
Is it for me? Is for me the question?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes, yes, please.
sorry, because I hear you a bit parts of it I didn't hear. Could you rephrase your question again for me?
Okay, I was talking about decolonization. Are there any instances where you are attempting to decolonize classical music education?
Meaning what? Can you just elaborate more? Meaning to bring it all to
To
different
make it
nations, to
less Western focused.
Yes, to recognize the local epistemologies of the local people around
yes,
them.
okay.
Yes,
Okay, now I understand. Yeah,
okay.
that's great. I mean, I think classical music is very international. Of course, it derives from lots of different motives that come from the nature and the culture of the composer himself. So if you play Spanish music, of course you identify Spanish roots and Spanish, I would say, folk music, right? But on the other hand, once it's delivered to the public, it's very international. And once it's played all over the world, then it's not just Spanish. It's Spanish rooted, but it belongs to to the whole world. So I think it's a beautiful game, right? It's a nice play between the local and the ethnomusicology and being very cosmopolitan. And I think this is what we also love. We want to preserve our roots and our culture because that's where we find, and that's what I love so much about Demikev, Dr. Demikev, who said, that society is not, there is no such a thing as society, but rather individuals with families. So it's really about the locality and I belong to someone, I belong to a culture, I belong to a nation, but I am also giving my art cosmopolitly, internationally to everyone who can enjoy and make it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Dr. Nubla King?
Hi, everybody. I'm going to, yeah, I really enjoyed this session as well. I'm going to try to put in context my question because it kind of evolved as I was listening to everybody's answers. And it has to do with, and it started with Stephen Guy's AI, right? I am ambivalent about it because of all of the different benefits and obviously the problems with it. But this is not necessarily an AI question. It is about the relationships between resilience and struggle. So when GPS first became a thing, right, where you really didn't get that lost anymore, where you didn't have to look at a map, etc. There's a famous study about neuroimaging of taxi drivers' mental maps in New York City, and how crazy, like, it was so full, and just the mental map of New York that they had, or the region that they were in, was so good and detailed because they had to navigate it, find it on their own, etc. And you can call that engagement, if you will, right? And they had to struggle to learn it. And as I'm listening to Dr. Wolf's playing, I mean, it's beautiful now, but I'm sure there was struggle involved in the learning of that, right? I forced my kids to play piano, and there was a lot of crying involved in the practice of it.
I can tell you, I
So
haven't forced mine because they don't want to. So
yeah.
mine will not play.
No, but it was really important because I knew that piano playing would help their brain, and I knew that then it would help their learning. And let's talk about how AI and is sort of doing the opposite of that, right? There's very little struggle in using these kinds of tools. So I guess this is a question for everybody. If you, all the panelists that we have, including Sandra Dixon, who I see is here, who we heard the video from. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe in your perspective, in your study of what you presented, the relationship between struggle and resilience? Is there a need for struggle in order to have resilience? Just in sort of your perspectives. So I'm just going to put it out there as sort of a general question.
Could could you select one person in the interest of
Well,
time?
okay, since we've really heard about since we just heard about Dr. Wolf, maybe not Dr. Wolf, maybe any of the other three panelists, especially those who maybe have not spoken yet, etc. So just, and if you have an answer to it, right? If you haven't spoken and you don't have an answer to it, that's fine. But if you have an answer to it, please, welcome to respond to that.
Yeah, okay, so I'll take a stab at it. Just to say a few things. Oh my goodness, Abby, it's very interesting you asked that question, because in researching for this presentation, I found a very provocative quotation that said something like, neoliberalism actually thinks that precarity is what creates resilience. So, in other words, struggle is what makes possible the development, the capacity of that virtue of resilience. But so that that allows me to make a distinction between good kind of this equation between precarity, struggle, and resilience, and bad kind. When it's based on inequality, when it is a result of failing to address questions of social justice, it would be irresponsible to see the positive side of how struggle causes resilience. However, in the context that you are speaking about, I have children as well. I think the only thing that builds resilience is struggle. But I still make that distinction that where do you locate that? If it's like a government policy that denies social ontology, that denies the role of the state, then it's bad. But if it's a context of development and children and people, then challenge is actually the only thing that helps you build resilience.
Okay.
I
Anybody
couldn't
else
agree
want
more,
to
I have to
circle
say,
back
because you
before we
know,
go to
music
Dr.
is
Schmidt?
about practicing, going to competitions and failing. And you know, you see all the results of the great competitions that we won, but there's so much that we lost from a very young age. And I think that the emotion that we try to refrain from feeling and also giving our children to feel is embarrassment. We want people not to be embarrassed. We're trying to refrain from embarrassment. And I think embarrassment in general is something that has to be felt, has to be experienced. And through this, and through struggle, and through practicing, and through failure, then I think we can get stronger and more resilient.
Oh no, that is a whole other tangent. Embarrassment and failure and success. That's a whole other. But I love it. I mean, the next Nexus, maybe, Jackie. Nexus
Yes,
conference.
it's a good theme. It's
Yeah.
a good narrative.
Dr. Schmidt.
Yes, thank you so much. I was considering a number of things that have been discussed, and all of this has been a fantastic session. Thank you so much. The first piece that really struck me is this idea of we can only cultivate depth of understanding by going through the process of the genuine learning. And so that has come through your work, Orit, as well, Rahanu, as well as Stephen, and as well through Sandra's messaging too. We have to develop, we have to learn, we have to see, and sometimes we have to find that there are rough edges, and we have to find ways to still move with that. I find right now this question might be one that any one of you in the panel can certainly feed back to, but my thinking is related to the discomfort that needs to be felt for growth is necessary. It doesn't have to be perhaps defined as discomfort so much as it is growth. It just is. And we're not in an acceptance point to be able to grapple with that discomfort and the regulation that goes with it. While I see that music has been an area that for me, or it has really informed my life, and so I'm so grateful for it because it's allowed me to have a trajectory of managing things like writing, which, initially wasn't natural. And so it is now. But I look at these things and I think if we don't refine our processes to say this is growth, we need to be comforted in the discomfort and to be conscious that growing means that we are expanding beyond whatever was the known. I think I'm curious about how in application in higher education, we will say to students, it is okay. It is okay not to have good marks initially. It is okay. And wondering then about those barriers of if I'm growing and I'm on a trajectory of growth, how can we then assure someone you don't need the AI? You don't need to lean into something when your critical voice is what we need to get to, where we need to hold that and embrace that. In the same as relationships, we are not perfect in every relationship. We don't always see each other. We don't always embrace each other from where someone is at, and we have to learn that. And it isn't that we are trying to affront, but we might be learning. So I'm curious about folks' commentary about how we might introduce or talk about or engage those discussions around it is okay to not always have those perfect moments. AI can maybe give us the impression of a perfect moment, but it really isn't such because it isn't owned, it isn't real. Similarly, I won't get to being able to play beautiful music without having those moments of that didn't go well, that I need to learn from. So, what are we seeing, and what would we recommend for the instilling and undergirding for students to have that understanding that growth might feel uncomfortable? I think we're pushing against a societal framing right now that discomfort is not okay. And I'm curious about what folks might want to comment on.
Okay, since we have 5 minutes before the lunch break, could you select someone specifically that you'd like to hear
Yeah, I can. I just want to add to the question that Abby raised here. I see it as an equation, Abby. You can't start building resilience from nowhere. So struggle has to be built into the equation. That's my point here. And the struggle can be defined in many ways as challenges that are you're facing, and then you start to say, how do I react to those challenges? And that's where you're building your resilience. That's my take on that.
How do you do it in the time we're living in, where struggle is not supported in a lot of North American parenting? Different parts of the world actually are not having to deal with this, but North American parenting has there's a trend towards excessive permissiveness and protecting your children from every little thing. So by the time they're 20, they're still living in your basement. And if you come from a collectivist society, that is appropriate. In North America, that is not appropriate, but that is what is happening. So back to Dr. Schmidt, who would you like to answer your question? We have 4 minutes.
I would be happy to hear from Berhanu, Stephen, or I mean, Sandra. I mean, whoever feels so inclined to offer something, I'm fine. Stephen.
Yeah. I'll say that to end this panel discussion with some hope as well is that I think that students now already, even after just a few years, in the case of what I'm researching about AI and writing, they understand now a bit more that the shortcut is the shortcut, and that if they really want to be able to do something, especially when it comes to knowledge education and teaching, our students are education students, and they know that they have to feel the discomfort. They're prepared, and they're post-secondary students in 2025 in North America are used to certain types of discomfort that probably many of us weren't used to. And I do think that they are actually really quite resilient already. And I see, of course, with students, but also with my colleagues, a much greater appreciation for imperfection. Nothing feels better than noticing somebody trying to say something complex, to communicate something that's evidence of deep thinking, that has a bit of some errors of grammar or punctuation. Just a few typos are so beautiful to me now. And I think that the students understand that accepting imperfection is there is a new dawning, I think, even in the last year, of yeah, I see green shoots.
So Hope, thank
I would
you.
say adding to that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Dixon. Is that
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's a great question. I think adding to the, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I would say for me personally, and sort of looking at the research that I do and engagement with students, I think for me it's more shifting from safe spaces to brave spaces. And I think for me, I find experimenting with healthy self-disclosure is important to allow students to see my vulnerability and to see my imperfection. I think students do appreciate that because they see my humanity. And I think it really creates space for them to also be vulnerable as well and to know that I am not perfect by any means. I'm not an expert by any means, but I can actually invite them to give their perspective, to give their feedback, and to be part of that collaborative process. I think for me, the collaboration is important, creating space to lean into those discomfort with students, having these, candid conversation is important, and to really work alongside with them, not working for them, but working with them to grow, is important. So that sort of strategies that I've implemented in my engagement with students, and I think it makes a huge difference.
I love that idea of vulnerability because it really shows how things become possible. When I was doing my PhD, I was in a split program where we did some things remote and then we went for these long residencies. And in the residencies, you ended up living with your faculty, so you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them. This was about, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years ago. And I remember sitting around a breakfast table with a bunch of people eating, eggs and toast, and their books were all being used as coffee coasters because, of course, they were all faculty, they all had PhD, they'd all written books, they'd all published. And the fact that I was just sitting next to them, we were just people having breakfast together, and their books, their published work was just sitting there on the table next to the butter dish,
Yeah.
told me that I too could do this. So it was really getting to see the human side of the equation that opened up the sense of possibility in me in terms of what could come next.
Yeah.
On that note, we are at time. Thank you all for a phenomenal session 2. The tech gods are mostly with us. I don't know what has happened to Dr. Lomia. I will try and reach her on the lunch break, and if we can fit her in somewhere else, we will do that.
Thank you very much.
Gets a 1-hour break, and we will see you all back here soon.
Thank you so much. It was lovely, really interesting, and very sharing and open. Thank you for allowing this conversation.
Wonderful.
Lovely.
Such a gift. Have a good break, everyone.